All right, all right, all right. We are live. Clark is already waiting. He's ready, locked and loaded. There he is. How you doing, my brother? All right, here we go. Somebody else just joined. Remember, hey, Harold, how are you, brother? I am duo interstatal. Let's go. Let's get it going. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Angie's Angles. It is January the 16th in the year of my Lord, 2025, if you can believe 2025. Holy Hannah. We are 1 month away from the legendary 60th birthday trip to New Orleans. Babs and I, she's gifting this to me. Hey, Tom, how are you? Nick, Troyano, what's going on? Hey, Kevin, what's going on, buddy? I am Interstatal. Let's put up Nick. Hey, what's going on? We got Jesse Winker back, but the Pete Alonso negotiations are full of crap. I can't agree with you more, Nick, and that's what tonight's show is going to be. And yes, Nick, let's say a little, it was just a tad outside. Mr. Euchre, Bob Euchre, passed away today. Mr. Baseball himself. He had spent about 70 years in the game of baseball. Something amazing, if not more. Good for him. He had a great year. A very colorful guy. Very funny guy. Just a tad outside. Too funny. So tonight's episode, we're going to strictly focus on the Pete Alonso / Vladimir Guerrero rumors. Now, my good friend Kevin Elliott, also known as Kevin Lytics, called me up before the show saying, bye-bye, Petey. Yeah, Harold, just a bit outside. Saying that Pete's done with the New York Mets, that the Mets countered Boris's and Pete's offer of 3 years and $90 million. They came back at 3 years and 68/70 million. I'm having a hard time understanding, believing this. I don't see that. You got a lot of talking heads out there. Andy Martino, John Heyman, et cetera, unless I hear from David Stern, Steve Cohen, or Boris himself, I'm not buying it. The Mets are equally in need of Pete Alonso signing as much as Pete Alonso's in need of the Mets signing him. It's a two-way street. That's right. Must be in the front row. Very good, Clark and Harold. Thank you for that. Little Bob Euchre humor. So the Pete Alonso / Vladimir Guerrero rumors are running rampant. Everybody and their grandmother seems to have an opinion on the situation. Kevin, I don't think that's true. I think the Met fan base is probably, if you had to ask me with a gun to my head, 85-15 with Pete coming back. I think the Met fan base as a whole, 85% of them want to see Pete back in blue and orange, and 15%, which you make up of that, Kevin, wants to see him take a hike. Now, he's definitely overplayed or underplayed his hand, however you want to look at it. Pete Alonso walked away from a 7-year 160, 7-year 158. They countered allegedly with a 3-year /90 with his average annual average value at $30 million a year. They kind of rounded up to 93 to give him $31 million a year, which would have made him the highest average annual valued first baseman in the history of the game. They wanted opt-outs. It's my understanding that the Mets, from what I'm reading, that the Mets didn't want to offer any opt-outs. And let me say something about David Stearns. If we're going to go into 2025 without Pete Alonso and without replacing Pete Alonso's bat, then we're going to have a long season. Because you need Pete Alonso's bat in that lineup. You need those 30 to 40 home runs for first base, because who are you going to put there? So sure, the rumor is you're going to put Vientos at first and then open up the competition at third between Beatty, Acuna, and Mauricio. Well, those guys aren't going to give you anywhere near Vientos' third base numbers. So now you're taking Vientos' third base numbers, replacing Pete's numbers at first with Vientos. Now you're leaving third base wide open, both defensively and offensively. And I just don't think that's going to do anything. Hey, Jonathan, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate you being here. Save the polar bear. We're going to put you up on the big screen. Jonathan, I think you're a first time, long time. Save the polar bear. Yeah, I agree. I definitely think that we need Pete back. Now, whether or not now here's a problem, right? And I read this on Facebook, and I agree with this assessment. Say Pete signs for his 390. Let's just say 390 he signs. Well, in his head, mentally, he's going to be very bitter that that's all he could sign for, because Boris promised him the freaking goddamn universe and failed to deliver. Hey, Nick, do me a favor. Expand on what Sal Licata's take on this. Nick, if you could type it in the box, I'd appreciate it. We'll put it on the big screen. Clark, I'll take Contreras. I'll take him in an nanosecond. I got no problem with Contreras coming over to the Mets. But now the rumor is that we're going to make a big trade offer to the Blue Jays for one Vladimir Guerrero. Now, that's a double-edged sword, because there's no reason to overpay for Vlad this year when he's a free agent next year. Now, the only thing you're doing is, if you make that trade, you got to get Vlad's commitment that he's signing an extension with you. Otherwise, you don't do it. There's no way you offer up an Acuna, a Gilbert, this guy and that guy for 1 year of Vlad. You don't do it. You might as well give Pete $40 million for 1 year deal and say, take it or leave it. I mean, you don't do it. You don't sell the farm for 1 year of Vlad unless you know for sure he's going to sign an extension. And then you ask the Blue Jays for a 72-hour window to work out that extension with Vlad. That's the only way I do that. So Nick says that Sal Licata on the Fan said, enough is enough, and how the Mets need Pete and how they are no good other options out there, something like that. Well, Nick, I don't necessarily agree with Sal Licata, and I know Sal Licata is wiping his hands clean of Pete Alonso. I don't think you could easily do that as a diehard Met fan. Pete Alonso is on pace to break and shatter every New York Met home run record, RBI record in the history of the franchise. He's your homegrown talent. He was the rookie of the he broke the rookie of the year home run record right after Judge said it. The guy's power numbers are off the charts. Fourth quickest to 200 in the history of the game for the age, etc., etc., etc. You just can't walk away from that history, in my humble opinion. I want to hear everybody's input on this. Let's have a dialogue. Let's have a conversation about that. Now let's talk about Vlad coming over. Now, Vlad comes over. Say for some amazing chance you get that window of opportunity to have that extension contract conversation with Vlad. He agrees to an 8-year deal with the Mets, whatever millions, blah, blah, blah. Then I'm okay replacing Pete with Vlad. Okay? But if I'm Juan Soto, I'm saying to Mr. Stearns, I'm knocking on David Stearns' door saying, who's protecting me? Who's protecting me? So the lineup as it stands right now, currently, I guess we could see Lindor. I'm not crazy about Nimmo as number 2, but Nimmo is number 2. Soto number 3. Vientos number 4, I have to assume. And then who's protecting Vientos? Marte, Winker, Alvarez. That's not warm and fuzzy to me. Now, if we had Lindor, Nimmo, Soto, Alonso, Vientos, Marte, Alvarez, now you're talking about a lineup. You just can't. Hey, Mark, how are you? How you doing, brother? I am quadruple interstatal. So, we need Pete Alonso's bat in that lineup. And I firmly believe in that lineup with Soto batting in front of Alonso and Vientos batting behind Alonso, that Alonso instantly becomes the 40, 120 guy that we know him to be. 40 plus 120. So I don't know what to say about that. Kevin, I don't know what you mean by pay attention to YouTube. I'm not on YouTube. I'm on StreamYard. I don't have the YouTube feed up, so I don't know what's going on YouTube. So let's hear some Harold, Clark, Nick, chime in. Mark Brooks. Mark, you made an interesting comment. I'll put it on the big screen. Mark Brooks says, I wouldn't leave my family that I love. Daddy gives me enough allowance. Well, are the Mets really showing Pete Alonso love by lowballing him? So the latest I heard, and it's not been confirmed, it's only been out there on social media, was the Mets counted their 390 with a 368/70. Now, I don't know how you could do that. I don't know how you could do that to Pete Alonso, in my humble opinion. And there's another dynamic. So we had a lot of discussions. Kevin and I had discussions, my other friends and I. If Pete doesn't hit that home run off of Devin Williams in Milwaukee, this conversation might not be happening, because I don't know if the Mets even offered Pete Alonso a contract. But because of that home run, because that extended their playoff run, because that eliminated Milwaukee and made the Mets one step away from the World Series, that bought Pete some conversation. So we're at the 8:42 mark, and I don't think we've resolved anything. So I'm an optics guy, right? Brett Milletta will tell you I'm an optics guy. And the optics that I'm seeing before me is saying all this information is hogwash. I'm not buying any of it. We're not hearing any official dialogue from Stearns, Cohen, Boris, Alonso. The four main principles in this whole conversation, we're not hearing anything. So my question goes, it's off of all these guys that want to be first to report the story. The Martinos, the Heymans, these guys who really, in my humble opinion, don't have a pulse on the situation. Until I hear it officially from the Mets, the Post reported it, so they got it from a source, etc., etc. Now Scott Boras is backing off, retracting from the Prince Fielder comment that he was using that as a measuring yardstick for Pete's contract, 7-8 years and $210 million. I mean, listen. I said post October that the Mets should have thrown out 7-2-10 to Pete, gave him a 48-hour window, and said, take it or leave it. Because we really missed out on opportunities doing this dog and pony show with Pete. Now, I really don't think that the Mets were willing to have this dance if they thought it was going to be the Lindy, right? It's the waltz. It's taken time to develop. The Giants are a possibility, the Angels are a possibility, and the Blue Jays are a possibility. But if Pete goes to the Blue Jays, that means Vlad either becomes the DH or goes to play third, his natural position, apparently. But what does that do for Vlad? What's that Vlad saying? Vlad's their first baseman. Now, Vlad's got to take a a backseat to Alonso because that's the only position Alonso could play. So I'm not really sure. Hey, Eric, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you. Hey, Clark, I'm sure you'd be ecstatic at Pete Alonso in St. Louis, but that ballpark is not conducive to Alonso. It's a big ballpark you guys got. And I don't think that that Pete would be welcomed would welcome going to St. Louis. Now, if he goes to the Giants, they're not a good team. If he goes to the Angels, we all know how the Angels are. They're not a good team. If he goes to the Blue Jays and the Blue Jays hold on to Vlad for one season, they can make some noise up in Toronto for sure. But who wants to live in Canada? I mean, never mind the tax difference you got to pay. So I'm not really sure. Well, they got my friend Kevin Elliott. What's his name in Boston? Kevin Cassis is their first baseman, who happens to be a very good ball player. So again, yeah, that's funny, Eric. He does, and he's no longer. So that's that. But Pete in Boston would be phenomenal. Oh my God, can you see Pete in Boston with the right field porch and the Green Monster? Pete would be tremendous in Boston, tremendous. But I don't think Boston's at that point looking to sign Pete. So I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what's going to come down. I hope to have an answer soon. I mean, pitchers and catchers are in a month. We got 30 days. Like Dom Scala said last week, and thanks again, Dom Scala, for being on Angie's Angles. That was very, very gracious of you. Like Dom Scala says, you don't want to sit out spring training. You don't have a good season typically by missing spring training. And I got to agree. I have to say that's that's what it is. So we're at the 847. Kevin Elliott, expand on what you mean. It says, Kevin's saying your team is a sub 500 team this coming year. Whose team? St. Louis, Red Sox? What team, Kevin? The Mets? And, I can't say that the Mets are a sub 500 team. I'm having a hard time buying into that, but I'll lean towards it more if we don't replace Alonso's bat. Now, Kevin, you made a mention earlier that I overrate home runs. I don't overrate home runs. I don't. I think home runs is a necessary tool to have a home run guy on your team, if not two. I don't overrate the home run. I know you're the more of a double guy than me. And I'm not discounting the doubles. The doubles are very important. And the home run is very important, Kevin. You cannot undermine or undercut the home run prowess, the power, the allure of the home run. It's very important to have at least one, if not two, home run guys on your team. You just have to. Kevin Elliott, let's put you on the big screen again, getting a lot of airtime tonight, Kev. Kevin's telling me that Pete did not want 7 years. He and he alone capped the contract at 3 years. So I'm not really, I don't know why you wouldn't want a 7-year contract, especially at your age. Harold, I hate this nonsense of holdout free agents coming up the works for everyone else. And it's usually because of Boris. Scott Boris, let's spend a couple minutes on Scott Boris. The shine has certainly worn off of Scott Boris, i.e. for the last 2 or 3 years, his free agents have had to take 1-year deals or creative contracts and sign after April, early May, late May. And they didn't wind up having great seasons. So Scott Boris is maybe has met his match with this new mantra with the owners of not succumbing to him and bending over backwards for the demands. Mark Brooks. Mark Brooks adds, Earl Weaver's favorite was the 3-run homer. You know, there's nothing wrong with the 3-run homer, right? If you get that 1 or 2, right? Harold, Cody Bellinger, for example. Martinez, J.D. Martinez. The pitcher out in Arizona. I forget his name. So all these guys, Jordan Montgomery out in Arizona, all these guys, demanded a lot of money, expected a lot of money, on the words of one Scott Boras, and they wound up, still being very wealthy millionaires, but not disgustingly wealthy millionaires, if you know what I mean. So, I stopped at Barnes & Noble, my local Barnes & Noble, and the baseball magazines are not out yet. I always buy a couple of magazines, and they're usually outdated already because they're printed in November, December, and they hit the market in January. So they don't have the most up-to-date information, but they're still fun to – I like to peruse the projections of certain players. Yes, Eric, I'm very excited for Monday. Thank you for asking. As a matter of fact, me and my buddy were looking to try to go down there, but oh my God, the train fare is like $300, $300 plus round trip. So that's out. We were talking about driving down, but I'd imagine the traffic's going to be like disaster. So that's probably not an option. So I'm going to, I guess, have to watch it from the comfort of my living room, which is just fine as well. I have no problem with that. So Kevin Elliott's telling us that Boras is an ass, but he's doing his job. I don't think he's doing his job, Kevin. I think he's giving them bad advice. I think he's overshot the market expectations or the market cap, right? It's quite obvious that he's overpricing. He's overpricing Alonso's market value. The Astros signed who was the Arizona guy that they signed for 3 years, $60 million, right? So it's tough. I mean, as a New York man, and I listen, I was a staunch Pete Alonso fan. Then Kevin Elliott and Kevin Lennox got into my head, and I became an anti-Alonso fan because of the chase rate. He was swinging and missing at balls. Christian Walker. Johnny Freedom, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you. Christian Walker signed the 3-year $60 with the Astros. So who happens to be what's a PRQ? I don't know what a PRQ is, Kevin. Hey, Terry, how are you? Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you. Terry, thanks for joining us. So, Christian Walker, some say is a better bat than Alonso, and I say differently. I like Alonso's bat better than Walker's bat. But Pete's got to start walking a little bit more and increasing his on-base percentage. So I'm not a pro owner, Kevin. That's funny. That's fine, Ter. Thanks for joining. I appreciate you. We're at day 53, Mark. We're going to do the prayer circle. We've talked about Pete Alonso, a little bit of Vlad Guerrero. Hopefully this time next week we'll be doing having an update. Maybe we'll have some resolution. I'm still hoping that the two sides could come together and that Pete Alonso remains a Met for at least the next 3 years, because I think it's very critical to Juan Soto's success. And I've said that. I've stated that. All right, let's jump to our prayer circle. Harold, we're praying for Dawn Squared, your wife and your co-worker. Scott Tobias, we're praying for your wife and your mom. Linda Stein, we're praying for your dad and yourself. And you had the surgery yesterday on the hand. The pain blockers, the nerve blockers have diminished. They've gone away. But you said the pain is less than it was pre-surgery. So Godspeed with your recovery. Mark Brooks, we're praying for your dad and yourself. Kevin Elliott, there's a whole list of things we're praying for you, my friend, including praying for yourself to get out of your own way. Krause family, we're praying for Aubrey as she's fighting the ugly C word and that she remains in remission. And Darcy, we're praying that your foot recovery continues on the right path. Clark, we're praying for your brother-in-law, Brad, sister Tricia, and yourself, young man. Deb and Lee, we're sending prayers down to you guys in Maryland. Marianne Bella, we're praying for your mom out in Las Vegas. Larry Levy, we're praying for your wife, Frida, as she battles the C word and is in remission. Mr. McGowan, we're praying for your health. You're in rehab right now. I'm trying to get updates on Mr. McGowan. Last week we prayed for my Aunt Pat, and I'm sad to say that my Aunt Pat has passed. She passed to my knowledge peacefully. She was on home hospice care. She joins her husband, my Uncle Charlie, my mom and dad, and a host of others up in heaven, and I'm sure they welcomed her with open arms. So, praying for Donner, Billy Miles, the McGill family. My Aunt Pat lived with them, and she was a wonderful person, always caring, always loving. I went down, as you all know, late November, and I was very happy to spend the day with her while she was still here with us. We had a couple of laughs, a couple of chuckles, looked at some pictures, updated her and my boys. So God bless Aunt Pat. Rest in peace. Also want to add, some might look at me and say, what are you doing? But, for those pet owners out there in the world, our pets become our families. And my best friend, Alan Lands, they put their dog Charlie to sleep today. Last week, Charlie developed some blood around her heart. It seemed to resolve itself momentarily. They got her home. They treated her some treats and dinners and et cetera, et cetera. And then yesterday, she came up with blood again around her heart. And then the vet's advice and then the consensus of the Lance family was to be around Charlie, give her all the love, and put her in her sleep. So we'll pray for the Lance family, that it's sad when you lose a pet. I've lost many. It's hard to get over. But then you pick yourself up and you move on, and hopefully you get another pet, and you replay that whole experience. So, Lance family, we have you in the heart. Please keep my cousin Donna, Billy, and Miles in your prayers from the passing of Donna's mom, Aunt Pat, and everybody else on the prayer list. I appreciate that. So that's funny. I'm reading that clock. Kevin says, I'm taking my ball and going home. And Clark replies, that's the best post you made all night. That's very funny. Listen, let me tell you about Kevin. Kevin's very gruff. He's very grumpy. He is the original Seven Dwarf Grumpy. But Kevin is very, very, very wise with the baseball. He's opened my eyes to some things. He's fed me information. It's been true. He was a huge Mark Vientos guy, an anti-batty guy before Vientos got the call up. He said the Mets totally spit the bit by choosing the wrong guy. We had arguments back and forth on it, but Vientos proved Kevin to be somewhat of a genius. So I appreciate everybody. Hey, Danica. Hey, what's going on, Danica? You made it in right before the ending. This has been Angie's Angles coming to you live from Smoke Therapy, 215 on Cockman Avenue. If you're ever in the neighborhood, please send me a note. Stop by. Love to see you. Thanks for the newbies today. I appreciate it. Good night. God bless. I love you.